Hello everybody, this is Skyflight44, aka Zect44, and today I'm going to be talking about some Lord of the Rings LCG cards. Now I'm going to be splitting up the core set cards, because there's a lot of them, into 4 different videos. Normally, when I go about talking about certain cards, I'm mainly going to be putting it into a single video, in which some of them are going to be relatively short. But as I go about doing this, I'm also going to be telling you about their uses and how good they might be in a regular game, and then also their uses in our specific campaign. Now, there are 4 different types of cards. We have heroes, we have allies, we have attachments, and we have events. Heroes are what your deck is based off of. And for each hero of a specific sphere, you can go about using cards from that sphere. If you do not have any kind of like leadership, which is what these cards would be, heroes, then you can't go about playing any leadership cards because you need leadership resources for them. There are ways of adding a leadership icon, resource icon, to a hero, which would, like in Aragorn's case, is an easy way of getting him into a spirit resource icon in this set, which allows him to spend his resources on either leadership or spirit cards. Yeah. Leadership is mainly about... It has some decent support abilities, but the main thing about leadership is resources. They have the easiest way of getting into resources, a lot of ways of getting into resources. Even in the core set. This also makes a lot of their stuff more expensive, and specifically their allies, which they have a lot of them, can be expensive. Or not necessarily worth the resources you have to put into them. So let's go about talking on the leadership heroes first. We have Aragorn, we have Glóin, and we have Theodred. Now, Aragorn has a threat cost of 12, the highest in the core set. The only one that matches him is Glorfindel, and rightfully so. He has 2 willpower, 3 attack power, 2 defense power, and 5 hit points. He has Dunedain, Noble, and Ranger as traits, in which the only one in there that's actually really useful, early on I would probably go with saying, is at most Ranger, and that comes down to going into the, what was it called? Going into the Heirs of Numenor expansion. Otherwise, any of these traits don't really matter. He is Sentinel, though. And Sentinel has the option of defending another player. If you're playing solo, Sentinel means nothing. But if you're playing with a party of people, Sentinel can be so useful. At 2 defense and 5 hit points, he's already a pretty good defender. Not the best, we have others. But the fact that he does have Sentinel does give him the ability to defend anywhere. That is very much a plus. After Aragorn commits to a quest, spend 1 resource from his resource pool to ready him. This allows him to go through quest and then defend later, quest, and then be able to attack later, which 3 attack power is very good. He's just overall a wonderful hero to have. Now, Glóin. Glóin has, for a 9, a cost of threat of 9, 2 willpower, 2 attack power, 1 defense power, 4 hit points. His response? After Glóin suffers damage, add 1 resource to his resource pool for each point of damage he has just suffered. This is exploitable. Very exploitable, and to be honest, Glóin's actually a pretty good hero. If you can heal him, if you can go through and add something like a Citadel Plate to him that will allow him to be able to soak up more damage, or maybe even give him the ability to modulate some defense, so that he can gain resources without him being put into mortal peril. That being said, you can lose Glowin quite easily. He only has 1 defense and 4 hit points, but it does give him the ability to still use his effect. Out of everything, his stat line isn't so bad. His response is actually pretty good, but the best thing I see on this, the best thing 100% I see out of everything is Dwarf. Noble, who cares? But Dwarf is the single most powerful trait early on in the game. And we're going to be using any dwarves we can get in our campaign. Now, going and playing this at the very beginning, from just having the core set cards, dwarves weren't entirely overpowered. There are some dwarf-centered cards, but over time, because a lot of like the Hobbit stuff came out, the Dwardelf cycle, and the Khazad-dûm cycle, definitely brought in a lot of dwarf support, which means dwarves are easily the best thing to choose in the beginning. Theodred, on the other hand, for a cost of 8, is 1 willpower to attack, 1 defense, 4 hit points. Not the best for his stat line, especially considering the fact that all you're going to be doing with him is questing. No matter what, he does have some decent attack power, and with 1 hit point, or with 1 defense and 4 hit points, he can take an attack. But his response is where he's actually really good. After Theodred commits to a quest, choose a hero committed to that quest, add 1 resource to that hero's resource pool. With an entire group of 4 players, Theodred is very, very useful in giving resources where resources are needed. One of the things I love about this game is the discussion and the just brainstorming of what's going to happen to us, what's the best way of dealing with all this. There's so many different decisions you can go about making, and Theodred is just another one of those decisions. You have no decision on whether or not you're committing him to a quest, but for where that resource is going to go, that means quite a bit. And especially considering the fact that Glowin's resources are always going to be leadership, unless you can get another resource icon onto him. But Theodred's resource can go to anybody that's going to quest. So let's go about talking on the allies. Now, allies are have a very similar card layout. But on the very top left, instead of the threat cost, you have the cost and resources you need to use in order to play them. They're also a lot worse. For the Snowborn Scout, though, it doesn't really matter. For a cost of 1, he is a 0011. He doesn't need much, because his response says it all. After Snowborn Scout enters play, choose the location, place 1 progress token on that location. That is incredibly useful. Playing the regular game, though, you can also go and use Snowborn Scout is a pretty much blocker. He can take a hit you can only take 1 hit, but he can take a hit for you instead of your heroes, which is very useful. In my campaign, though, Snowborn Scout is very useful for his ability, but you do not want to attack with him, or you do not want to defend with him, because if you lose him, he's gone. Then again, if you have victory points, you can easily get him back, because he's only going to cost you 2 victory points. But that is still a waste. Snowborn Scout definitely, though, is out of all of the leadership here allies. Snowborn Scout isn't so bad. Now, Guard of the Citadel is, in comparison to a lot of the other allies we have, isn't very good. For a cost of 2, he's only 1 willpower, 1 attack, 0 defense, which is strange as all hell, considering the fact that his Gondor trait basically just makes you think of defense, especially considering he's not a ranger. He has 2 hit points. This stat line is seen in several others. We have this pretty much a very similar stat line in the Miner from the Iron Hills, except he has a useful and pretty much unique for a long time effect. For the Wandering Took, no matter what, he's still a 1/1/1/2 and therefore can do more. And for the legend Erebor Hammersmith, he is a 1/1/1/3 with a useful effect on top of it. Guard of the Citadel is just, in comparison, not very good. And after the core set, you're not really going to be using him too much once you get better allies. However, the Guard of the Citadel, at the very least, is an ally to be played, which is all you can go about asking for in the campaign. Longbeard Orcslayer. For a cost of 4, he's a 0/2/1/3. The attack power is already pretty good, or at the very least is good enough for what we want. Usually we'll attack with stuff that has just 1 attack, but getting something to stick that has 2 is more definitely so much better. He has 1 defense and 3 hit points, which means he can take an attack and survive it, which is something not a lot of allies can actually boast. But his response is fairly good. After Longbeard Orcslayer enters play, deal 1 damage to each orc enemy in play. And considering Sneak Attack is also in this, we can go about abusing this response. Also, if it hasn't been said before, and I'm going to continue saying it, Dwarf is so useful very early on. Son of Arnor. Now, the cost of 3 for just 2 attack and 2 hit points isn't very good. At the very least, Son of Arnor is specialized in that it's good for attacking. But its response is where it has some utility. After Son of Arnor enters play, choose an enemy card in the staging area or currently engaged with another player, engage that enemy. The fact that this card can take enemies out of the staging area, or can take an enemy engaged with another player to loosen the load from them, that has some uses. There are much better allies. However, for the core set, Son of Arnor isn't so bad when playing with leadership, especially if you're trying to play more of a support role. Not to mention, 2 attack power isn't so bad. Silverlode Archer. For a cost of 3, 1 willpower, 2 attack power, 0 defense, 1 hit point. Not gonna lie, I don't very much like this card. It has its uses, like everything else, it has its uses. You're going to get better allies, once again, when it comes to leadership. But in the core set, this is going to be something we're going to have to use. And how I see, when I look at this card, all I'm seeing is a cost of 3, a 0/2/0/1. Why do I see that? Because it has 1 hit point in the core set, and there's several different cards in the core set that basically state, deal 1 damage to ally or to all characters you have of a play with a threat of 35 or higher. Deal 1 damage to all exhausted characters. Yeah, that kind of means Silverlode Archer will never quest, because there's always a possibility you're going to lose him. And if you lose him, then he's not going to put his willpower to the quest anymore, which makes all that for naught. So, Silverlode Archer is kind of not very good in my opinion, not really worth it. He does have the ranged ability, or the ranged keyword, which allows him to attack on another part of the field. So again, it has his uses. If it wasn't for the fact that Theodred and Glowin and Steward of Gondor make it so much easier gaining resources, a lot of these leadership allies would be much, much worse. Let me go to the unique allies. Starting with Brock Iron Fist. Brock Iron Fist is a cost of 6, a 2/2/1/4. This is the single worst card in the entire core set. Any other card I can see as being more useful in a regular game than this. For a cost of 6, his stat line is pathetic. For a cost of 6, his effect after a dwarf hero you control leaves play, put Brock Iron Fist into play from your hand. There is, even later on, there's almost no way and no real reason you would ever want to see a dwarf hero leave play. Which means this card's effect is useless to you. You do not want to plan around using this effect. His stat line is Glowin's stat line. Why would I ever want to go about putting this in when I already have Glowin? It's just to replace him. And that's probably the entire reason why he was even made, because you're likely to lose Glowin, and this is kind of a way of saving something, but otherwise this card's just terrible. Even its dwarf trait can't go about saving it. For cost of 6, I would at least like maybe at least like a 2/3/2 for the very least, and that thing can Brock Iron Fist can do pretty much whatever you want him to. But it's just that response which just kills the card. Otherwise, if you lose heroes and you do not have heroes, throwing Brock Iron Fist as a hero replacement in our campaign is a possibility. But otherwise, this card is to be thrown out. Only in the presence of a, true hero like Dane Iron will actually make Brock Iron Fist useful. And even then, it's still not worth it. Faramir, on the other hand, is such a good card. The cost of 4, a 2/1/2/3 isn't so bad. His Gondor trait allows him to, with 4 Gondor, increases attack and defense, meaning he can defend. You can also go about using him as a quester, and more importantly, his action is one of the best in the core set. Exhaust Faramir to choose a player. Each character controlled by that player gets +1 willpower until the end of the phase. This is the only card I can think of in the core set and any point in the early part of this game that can contribute as much willpower, if not more, than Eowyn. At the very least, Spirit Eowyn. This card is literal bonkers. It also makes it so that if you have 10 characters, you can send them all to the quest, and Faramir can go through and add another 10 to the quest. Ridiculous. So, for allies, leadership really isn't doing too well. The best ones would be Faramir and Snowborn Scout, and possibly Longbeard Orcslayer. Yeah, that was weird what I said. Maybe I'm dyslexic sometimes. But we're getting to some better stuff. The heroes are good. The allies, But the attachments are gold. Both of them. Steward of Gondor is a unique card, which means you can only have one instance of this card in play at a time. So, attached to a hero. Attached hero gains the Gondor trait. That does mean something with 4 Gondor. Like, especially giving it to, let's say, Aragorn. He can go about gaining the Gondor trait, and 4 Gondor gives him 1 defense, which means 3 defense on him, and he can defend anywhere in the field. Very useful. But the action is just what makes it pure gold. Exhaust Steward of Gondor to add 2 resources to the attached hero's resource pool. Out of every single card in leadership, no card is better than Steward of Gondor. I would actually go about saying this is in the top 5 best cards in the core set. Hands down. And if you're playing leadership, you are almost always going to be playing Steward of Gondor. That resource generation is just too powerful. Then we have Calabrian Stone. Attached to a hero. Restricted. Heroes can only have 2 restricted, or any character can only have 2 restricted attachments. Attached hero gains +2 willpower. If attached hero is Aragorn, he also gains a spirit resource icon, which allows him to do spirit things too. It is unique, which means you can only have one of these in play, but 2 willpower for 2 cost of 2 is something you will not see for a very long time. Which makes this card so useful. Not to mention, gaining any kind of willpower kind of makes the entire game so much easier, because you can put less to a quest, which makes it so that you can go through and put more to everything else. For attachments, not many, but they're gold. The events, on the other hand, are more of a mixed bag. Common Cause. For a cost of 0, exhaust 1 hero you control to choose and ready a different hero. If you're playing, let's say, a solo game, Common Cause is pointless. Each hero should be useful for something. And if you have a hero ready, you're not using them for their intended action, then it's almost never very useful to exhaust that one for another one. You should already be using them. But in multiplayer, this becomes a hell of a lot more useful, because your defender that you might not be defending with because you have nothing to defend against might be able to ready another hero on somebody that does need to defend. Or you might be able to ready a hero like Legolas or Aragorn who can do things on other players' fields. This has a lot more use. But even then, still, heroes should have a purpose that they're being done for. No hero should be underused. Outside of Eleanor. Eleanor is the only hero I can think of in the core set where Common Cause is actually very useful, because Eleanor's effect is so useful when dealing with treachery cards. And because of that, if you don't run through anything, then she might be just a defender, and if you don't have to defend, because you're most likely using her in a support deck, then you can go about using Common Cause to exhaust her and ready a different hero, not necessarily one that you control. So, we go to Sneak Attack. Sneak Attack for a cost of 1 has one of the single best. This is one of the best cards in the core set. And again, in my opinion, one of the top 5 cards in the core set. Sneak Attack allows you to put 1 ally card into play from your hand. At the end of the phase, if that ally is still in play, return it to your hand. For a cost of 1, we can put Faramir into play and then exhaust Faramir to gain a shitload of willpower. We can throw in Longbeard Orc Slayer in order to attack, defend, and also gain its response. For a cost of 1, we can throw a Snowborn Sail into play just to place 1 progress token on a location to get rid of it. And it's gone. We can go through and do even Son of Arnor, which just to get an enemy engaged with somebody else to where we are for a very low cost, and we can still just attack with them. There's a lot of uses for. Hell, it might even make Brock Iron Fist somewhat playable, because he is a decent enough defender. And then he goes back to a hand. But the king of sneak attack is Gandalf. Being able to sneak attack a Gandalf into play, have him use one of his amazing effects, and then going back to your hand so you can play him again next turn. Nothing feels better. Valiant Sacrifice. After an ally card leaves play, that card controller draws 2 cards. Now, in the regular game, this isn't such a bad thing. After an ally card leaves play, well, you can plus off of the death of a Snowborn Scout. If you sneak attack an ally in, it leaves play, goes back to your hand, you can draw off of that. But normally an ally card's going to leave play because you have them, they're going to die. Which means this card is significantly less useful in our campaign. Still useful, but less useful in our campaign than in the regular game. Also, for a cost of 1, drawing 2 cards is actually pretty decent. It is much harder to... Usually it's a 1-for-1 in the core set when it comes to drawing cards. And therefore, while we're going to gain early on another card that draws us, it possibly draws every player 1 card for a cost of 1. This is the better option when it comes to solo play. Ever Vigilant. Choose and ready 1 ally card. Unlike Common Cause, which could be more useful and cost you literally nothing, Ever Vigilant is not exactly the best card. Having the ability to defend with somebody and then attack with them is decent enough. Allowing Faramir to quest and then use his effect later is also brilliant. And it's mainly for maybe Gandalf, to be honest, where you can use Gandalf to quest, defend, or attack because he's a 4/4/4. So you can do whatever you want. But otherwise, this has its uses, but if you're going to use resources to ready anything, you might as well make it a hero. For Gondor, on the other hand, until the end of the phase, all characters get +1 attack. All Gondor characters also get +1 defense until the end of the phase. This is a fantastic support card. For a cost of 2, in solo, this isn't exactly amazing. In a 4-player game, this affects every character, and all Gondor characters get +1 defense. Grim Resolve. Ever Vigilant may have a place, but nothing beats Grim Resolve. If you have 5 resources, which leadership probably has the ability to get in a single turn, Grim Resolve can swing a game that is going against you into your favor. You can quest with every single character, and then slap this down and defend and attack with everybody you have. Grim Resolve can do so much for you. Overall, leadership doesn't have bad representation in the core set. Again, with some standout cards such as Faramir, Snowborn Scout, the 2 attachments, Sneak Attack, and For Gondor. This is there's some good stuff here. But the ally selection, even though it has the most out of any selection in the beginning of the game, a lot of them are duds, and we're not going to be getting a lot of leadership allies if we go right into Shadows of Mirkwood. But oh well, those are my thoughts on these cards. Hopefully this has given you some insight on these cards that we're going to be playing with. Have a nice day, everybody.